Right, so this is a foreigner in the Philippines, and we've come round to, as I've always said before, you can go to various sites and look at Boracay, white beaches, five-star hotels and resorts, but that's not what our channel is about. And we're here now to talk to probably one of the most interesting men in the whole area. He's a former submariner. He lived as a mountain man in Montana on 20 acres, and then finally he was a truck driver. He entered a seminary. He studied the Bible. This is not someone that you meet on a white beach in Boracay. So this is my friend Philip, and I'm Terence, the foreigner in the Philippines. Yes. So you've got to tell us again why we just talked before we put the camera on. We just talked about what is it that makes a man move from a first world country to here.
And it's probably my history. I don't think I ever, even when I lived in the United States, fit into the mold. Fit into the educated mold that most people fall into of going to college, getting a degree, getting a job, working for a company a number of years, raising a family and retiring. I don't have none of that, except the retiring part. I think because I never fed into that mold, or that is one of the big reasons that I'm here. But what really got me here was a little creature called the pine beetle in Montana, which is...
So you were living on 20 acres?
In the mountains in Montana.
That was practically all trees, and then the beetle hit.
I was planning on living and dying there. I cut my own trees. I hand-hewn my own logs.
You built your own
cabin? I notched my own, and built my own log cabin without running water, without sanitation facility, without electricity.
And it has to be said as well that Montana is not a benign climate, is it?
Oh,
that's in the winter. That's
winter starts, ends in May and starts in September.
Right. So it's probably 9 months winter, and the last three months will be bad weather.
Oh yes, yes. And I actually moved into my cabin the 1st of January.
Oh my God! But you lived in a tent for a long time.
Lived in a tent for 9 months on my property, and that includes the snow, sub-zero temperatures, and the whole thing.
But we're getting ahead. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Before that, what was the point at which you entered a seminary to learn about the Bible?
That was my dad was a pastor, and so I grew up in that tradition. And my belief system has always been Christian and faith in Jesus Christ. And it was a natural tendency that when I graduated from college to go to the seminary, that's what I wanted to do.
Right.
And that I ran head-to-head like crash into liberalism in the seminary. And after approximately a year and a half, almost 2 years, a third of my class disappeared into the United States
because they didn't agree with the way that
it was a constant battle, the conservatives, and a constant battle with the liberal theology.
So even with Christianity there was politics heavily.
Very much so. Very much so. And it ran heavily in the system because they figured if you teach the teachers, in another generation we'll have converted the churches to the liberalism and that. So and I rejected that completely.
You and a lot of others.
And so I turned myself into a submariner, spent
that's when you so it was after that you entered the Navy. And you did how many years?
I did just 2.5 years. Spent patrol on a nuclear submarine, missile-carrying submarine in the North Atlantic, guarding against Russian attack during the Cold War.
So what kind of date was that then?
Oh, that would have been early 80s. And that I did that. And of course, I didn't agree with a lot of what that was, the mutual assured destruction, which we call MAD nowadays. I didn't really agree with that, but I knew what it was like to be an operational soldier with the idea that you might have to destroy a whole country. And we carried enough nuclear weapons aboard our submarine that we could have completely destroyed all of Europe and all of Russia. So, like I said, yeah, and that's one submarine, and that doesn't.
And how this is what always I have to say that I'm not a staunch religion-based Christian, though I've been called a better Christian than most Christians by some Christians. So we're of the same beliefs, but not in quite the same way.
He's getting there. It's just taking me a little bit of time to convince him where the truth really lies. He's working on it.
But what we have is that my difficulty understanding how you would be able to reconcile your beliefs in Christianity with being in a submarine that could probably annihilate actually the entire world.
Well, it's called patriotism, believing in the country that I was brought up in, and the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible. It's very easy because it followed Christianity, even though since that time, in the last 15 to 20 years, the country has completely moved away from being a Christian nation and has now become, oh boy, I don't even know what you'd call it anymore, and that has made it more difficult, and that's another reason why I'm here in the Philippines instead of still back in the U.S. and that. But that's another problem we should talk about.
Maybe that's another hour or two or three-day video.
Yeah.
Now, but so where are we going? We came out of the seminary, went into a submarine. Then up from the submarine, you started driving a truck.
I drove semi for almost 16 years.
So you drove all over the U.S.
And during that time, yeah, I've covered 48 contiguous states, and almost any town or city over 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 I've probably been in at one time or another, from coast to coast.
Even if it was only driving through it.
But it was during that time that I got my amateur radio license, because it gave me something to do driving miles over the road, and of course I listened to what has become popularly known as conservative talk radio, where the news isn't the news from your dedicated media, whatever you want to call that or make that, and heard a program in the mid-1980s that set me on the path that eventually sent me to Montana, and again sent me now to the Philippines, and it was an interview of a bank president who was explaining how they create money out of thin air, and also about a book written by, I believe, I gotta dig deep into my memory here, but the foreword was written by Newt Gingrich, but it is a book that actually talked about the overthrow of the U.S. Constitution and the U.S. form of government. And I'm going, this can't be.
Did this deal with the creation of the federal?
Well, it was a combination of everything. But what was really interesting is that the former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, had actually written the foreword to a book that advocated the overthrow of what they considered a constitution that was for an agrarian government instead of the popular mid-80s new technological government that was coming into focus, and of course with the computer and the internet and everything else. And that started my search into everything that was not media driven, into what they call the conspiracy theories, and I've looked at them all one way or another. And into what became popular known and still known as Patriot Radio, Patriot Conservative Radio broadcasts and news broadcasts, and that sent me eventually on the road to decide to go to a state where
to get the hell out of there.
where I knew everybody was conservative,
okay.
and they were, Montana. When I moved there, there was a little over 1 million people in the second largest, well now with Alaska, the third largest state in the Union. And 400 miles from border to border, north and south, 800 miles from border to border, east and west. This place is huge and mountainous, and it was the best place to just kind of disappear and prepare for whatever was coming.
Oh yeah. So isn't that known as the when the shit hits the fan movement?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
and that was the best place to be, and so I got 20 acres back in the mountains, about 3 miles off the main road and off the Missouri River between Helena and Great Falls. And there I built my cabin and decided that this was the place I was going to live and die and
you were
be
quite
prepared.
happy there. You were quite happy there until that beetle came along.
Yeah, and then a little thing called the pine beetle, which to this day I believe, honestly, that it was a sign from God that it was time to move.
Yeah.
And I put my land up for sale in an economy in 2010 that you couldn't give away land, much less sell it for money.
Right.
And I was even told by the realtor, well, if this takes anywhere from 6 months to a year or longer, I hope you're prepared. Yeah.
Right.
And within less than 30 days, I got a cash offer for what I asked for my property.
Right.
And this, I just knew I had to move, period. And this
when some things are so easy, you have to assume that there is some reason behind it.
Yep.
Others would call it timing, and there's all kinds of interpretations as to why things happen. And we're not here to interpret those. We get Philip's idea on what happened to him and why, and this is why it's important to talk to people and find out what their motivation was. So once you got your money in your hand, in your hot little hand, and you went out and you bought
I knew I had to. I never had a savings account. I never had a job where I'd been able to put money away. And I partied and lived up my youth.
Right.
And I had nothing.
Which all fits in the idea of going in the seminary.
Nothing to show for it, but a lot of memories, good
so
and
I guess
bad.
you held a drink in one hand and the Bible in the other.
Almost like that. But I knew I had to be able to survive the rest of my life on that money. So I bought a travel trailer, bought a pickup truck, decided I could never leave the mountains were in my blood, to move to the southern end of the Rocky Mountains, to a little town called Silver City, New Mexico, and the transit now was a simple fact that the next thing that entered my mind is, I don't have my land. I now have to rent a little chunk of property to put my trailer on. If worse comes to worse, I don't want to die alone. And so somebody told me about a website that I could go to meet a gal from the Philippines.
Now this is funny because you always have the emphasis of the Philippine woman has a vested interest in finding security with a Westerner who, by comparison, is very rich. So it's always the agenda, the hidden agenda, is always attributed to the woman. And you can hear by what Philip says, he decided that he wasn't about to die alone. So you started looking online.
Yeah, I had actually started looking. The first thing I did was online, buy a computer. The first time in my life I owned one of them things and that. And of course I looked locally and around the United States on the websites and found that being retired was a red flag that went up that went, oh, retired and rich, and you get every scam in the book.
Right. And you had your share. You had your share of that even when you came through to the Philippines.
Oh, yes,
didn't you?
yes.
You had some newborn 18-year-olds who were
Yes.
who were quite willing to come along and marry you.
Oh, that's, yes, definitely a must. And I actually did that for 2-3 months. I just gave it up, walked away from it. I said, if I've got to die alone, Lord, I'm fine. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
You know, I've got what I need to be able to survive and that. And then somebody just dropped a line on this Filipino website where I could meet somebody from overseas.
And that was
And
strictly Filipino, wasn't it, though?
It was Thailand and the Philippines, both of them. And little did I know, because if you'd asked me at that point, or if you'd told me at that point that you'll spend the rest of your life in the Philippines, I would have said,
as a farmer,
I would have said, I didn't lose nothing there. I don't need to go there to find anything. And less than 6 months later, I'm living in the Philippines.
Right. So you decided to go online. You also, even from the Philippine side, different responses which were you put to one side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, after the gift and the gap, I finally wrote a letter to this gal called Annabeth, told her what I was looking for. She replied back the next day, and I've still got copies of those 2 letters, framed and that. And we started talking every day for the next almost 3 months till I landed in Cebu and actually came to see her.
Well, that sounds like one of those ignition points where things do happen, where there's a lot of other stuff goes on, and disappointments and frustrations, and then feeling that nothing will ever happen, and then one thing happens, one letter from one person, and probably she may have had the same thing.
Well, her response was what I hadn't heard from nobody else. I mean, the whole tone, everything was different.
What did she say then?
I don't know if it was...
What was the killer letter?
No, if it's what she said, it was the fact that we decided to try to meet every day, and being retired, I said any time of the day or night, because there is a 14-hour difference. Right. So one's in day and one's in bed, and one's up working, and then they're in bed and you're up doing your daily stuff. So you're on opposite sides of the globe in that. We worked out a schedule where we could talk to each other before she went to work in her morning, and then her afternoon, and I'd just set the alarm and get up. And we did that.
But Philip, what did she say in that letter which made a difference?
I don't know if it was just a combination of the letter or talking to her the first time. It was down to earth. I mean, real. I mean, there was nothing special that she said except that's exactly what I'm looking for too, and that. But the fact that over the course, I mean, that's a meeting. That's something that gets you starting to talk about. Let's carry this a little further. But then talking twice a day, and that means she had to get up earlier to go to work and stay up later so we could talk on the internet, on Skype and that, and it became, and we didn't miss a day. And a matter of fact, for her birthday, we talked all day. She took off of work and we were actually on Skype most of the whole day.
Wow.
That devotion to the possibilities, I think, is what really tied the clasp on everything. It was always possible, but that devotion to that possibility was somebody that was real, that I wanted to meet, that I wanted to get to know more.
Well, I can remember I can remember what got me about my wife, Beth, was in just a simple phrase. She said, "Please be honest with me." And that's almost all that it took. She said, "Please be honest with me. Are you not in a relationship? Just tell me, because I'm looking for the one."
Yep.
And I texted her back and said, "I'm not looking for many women. I'm looking for one.
Yep.
And when I find that one, I won't betray her."
Yep.
So there was an immediate trust based on intuition,
Yep.
which nowadays is a much maligned idea. The idea that you can intuit that something is right. But
and I knew from the start that this was right, because I was talking to 2-3 other girls too,
right.
from the Philippines at the same time, and there was just no comparison.
No,
And that because they had told me back there, don't limit yourself to one,
right.
not just play the field. It wasn't the idea of playing the field, but you have to be careful.
Yes.
And you've got to be watchful of what's happening and that. So talk to, and even when you go there, see 2 or 3 of them and see what's real. By the time I got here, I didn't even have to worry about 2 or 3. I knew that this was it. So I sold my property, got what I asked in a time period that was absolutely incredible.
Right.
I moved to the southern border of the Rocky Mountains,
Right.
which was kind of a miracle in itself. And then I found the one person I wanted to be with and spend the rest of my life with, and another miracle. And of course, I attribute it all to my faith.
Yes.
That God was pointing me in that direction. And like I said, after I came here the first time, about 2.5, 3 months after we met, I landed in Cebu, met her, and that was it. I mean, we spent the next 2 months together, and that sealed the deal that everything was real. I love the Philippines,
Yeah.
and everything that it mentioned. I've learned a lot more about the Philippines
Yeah.
since that time,
Yeah.
but this was exactly what I was looking for. And now I've built, wow, six years later. A matter of fact, today is our 5-year wedding anniversary.
Oh, wow.
October 6th.
Congratulations.
And it hardly seems possible that now I'm already going on 7 years. I'm in my 7th year here already. And I wouldn't trade her for anything, and I wouldn't trade what we've been able to develop and grow here since that time.
What Philip is saying, he's saying that the message came from God. I'm actually married to a born-again Christian, and even though I don't believe in that way, I still think that we are constantly, if we are on our path
Just
of trying to
give me
be...
time. I will get him there.
Get away from me,
He's
Christian.
a hard one to change, but he's well on the road. He's got the basics.
So I'm in there. I feel that if you're on your path, you are receiving intuition. You are connected to the divine. See, this is why we're not so different. But whereas Philip might say the Lord, I'll say the Creator or the God power. It's all in semantics, I think. But the feeling is the same, and the belief system of knowing that something can be right against all kind of logic. Believe me, there will be people who are watching this who think that he is a fool, or if he had told them at the time. And me too. Are you crazy? Are you insane? You can believe so much. How do you know? All of those ifs and buts and can't be possible, all of that is based on the sum total of every person's wins and loses. Those who have succeeded in having faith and believing that life can be right will believe it, And those who have had nothing but bitterness and disappointments and betrayals, which they haven't handled very well and have contributed to, will find it very hard to believe that life can be this good, which it is.
Yes, very much so.
Even though you're the same as me, you have what I, if I may, call a pitiful pension from the US, and I have what is an absolute disgrace to all pensions coming from the US and the UK, but we live modestly. And for Philip right now, for what he's built over 7 years, and what he has, you wouldn't believe how hard this man works and how hard his wife works. They're just at the work all day. They're farmers. They have a full-blown, beautiful farm, but they live very modestly. And I think that that's true, isn't it?
Oh, yes, yes. I never had much.
No.
And like I said, I was fortunate enough that when I finally went back to the States, it was to sell everything there, which I took a 50% loss on my trailer, my truck, my motorcycle, all the toys that American men just love. Was all gone. My guns, oh gosh, my loading equipment. I mean, I had everything that a prepper would probably look for. I had enough food stacked away in my trailer for probably 6 months to a year that I actually gave away to the church. Yeah. It was worth all that. Sometimes you have to, and it's hard to convince people, which is easy here in a culture where the Filipino can pack everything in a little backpack that he owns, period, and can go anywhere. We in America tend to collect everything.
What George Carlin called stuff.
Yeah. And when we do, we are afraid. We have to hang on to this stuff no matter what. And it was so easy for me to go back and sell, and the hardest part was my guns, because it had been my hobby for 30-some years, and hunting in, there's nothing like hunting in Montana, I tell you, and I knew that was over with. But in this life, that may be important, but in the next life to come, it is really insignificant.
Yeah.
And I chose the next life to come.
Yeah. See, it seems like we are in sympathy on this. It's not a case of being, because of what we'll call advancing age. It's not a case of being ready for death. It's not a case of being afraid of or not afraid of death, or embracing the idea of death. But at a certain point, you become more interested in learning what it will take to survive as you make a crossover. And if you are on your path, if you have faith, that's really what you're talking about, and that's certainly for me. And on a human basis, on a spiritual basis, I've learned more since I came here.
Yeah, and I made that decision a long time ago. That's why I know that God's the one who led me here. There, I could give 1,000 different reasons of this and that and everything, and people just call it, well, shit just happens, or fate, or whatever. And no, He is directing my way for His purpose. Yeah. And now I see, by just being here, I am here now for the people that I've met, that have gotten to know me and everything else, and that they can see my faith and my understanding and the reasons for it. And being an example is the best conversion technique that there possibly is being the type of example that somebody else wants to be like, and envy or whatever, and that's why I'm in the Philippines.
Yeah, and that's why I am. And we're going to end off there, Philip.
Been a pleasure.
This is a foreigner living happily in the Philippines, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Thanks, Philip.
Yep.